technical issues here. Okay. Let's see how that goes. Okay, so hello everyone. Finally, we're back. So what I'm going to do is sneakily put myself back on camera. So hopefully I pop back up and yeah. Okay, so how's this? Should be able to see what's happening now. Just going to play around with my screen. Okay. So there might be a bit of delay to what I'm doing and what you're seeing. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to be talking about speaking, and in particular we're going to be talking about some vocabulary and how you can actually build your vocabulary in an active way. So just before we do get started, don't forget that we have an entire YouTube channel dedicated to the IELTS, and there are lots and lots and lots and lots of videos that you can have a look at. I think we've actually got close to 200 different videos, all to do with different parts of the IELTS test. Okay, and there's lots of great tips in there, lots of great practice and advice for you and your journey in the IELTS. And the other thing is you can join us in our Facebook group. It's called IELTS Success, and it's quite a small little group now, which means that you get lots and lots of access to me and Michael. We're there to answer any questions that you have and give you some advice and some tips on practice. So there's lots of ways that you can get involved with the IELTS Grind. You can also, if I sneakily jump to Discord, so we are here, we have our own Discord channel where you can come and chat to us, and if you want to practice speaking, there's also an option to do that. And the more students we get into the Discord, the better, because it means that you can actually talk to real people and practice, which is a really great way to improve your speaking. Okay, so what we're going to do today is talk about the vocabulary. So let's get started with that. Okay, so I'm just gonna check. Aha, I'm listening to myself. Let me just turn my volume down. Okay, so yes, let's talk about the lesson today. So first of all, what I'm going to do is get rid of my beautiful face so you can see exactly what's happening here. Okay, so let's talk about, let's see if that worked. Did I get rid of myself? Okay, so we are going to talk about the aims of today's live lesson first of all, and so the first thing we're going to do is talk about how you can improve your vocabulary by brainstorming with mind maps. So if you don't know what a mind map is, don't worry, I'm going to explain that a little bit later on, and exactly why this is a good method to improve your vocabulary. The other thing that's very important is to actively use any new vocabulary that you do learn. If you're just writing down words, or just just maybe coming up with lists of words, it's not a very effective way of learning vocabulary. But if you start using it in an active way, you're more likely to remember it and use it in the IELTS speaking test. And the other thing we're going to do is actually use some of the target vocabulary for the topic that I've chosen today, and we're going to use that to answer some questions. Now, you may have guessed already what the topic is just from the thumbnail, but I will talk about that in a moment. And the other thing we're going to talk about is how you can find out your current IELTS band score for speaking and for writing. And we'll talk about that towards the end. So hello everyone who's in the chat. Don't forget that Michael's there, ready to take your questions. If you have any questions for us, and he'll pass that on to me and I can talk about it live, or you'll get a direct answer from him in the live chat. Okay, so if everyone's ready, let's talk about some ideas to do with vocabulary and speaking. Okay, so this is basically a mind map. What we're going to do is we're going to take a topic, and today's topic is illness. And what we're going to do is try and build up a network of vocabulary to do with this topic. And we're going to do that in different ways. But I've chosen 4 different categories to think about for this particular mind map. So we're going to find out some nouns to do with illness. We're going to talk about some symptoms. So symptoms are the things that tell you the type of illness that you have. We're going to talk about idioms. So idioms are phrases with a particular meaning that if you don't learn them, you may not be able to guess what they mean. And using idioms in your vocabulary is a way that you can push up your score. In fact, if you're using idioms, it will add to a score of 6.5 and over, more towards 7. Not just if you use idioms on their own, but if you use them as well as other things. So idioms are important things to learn. And we're also going to be talking about vocabulary to do with cures. Okay, so let's talk about the method a little bit. How can we actually use mind maps in a positive way? Okay, so this is the method we're going to use today. So the first thing we're going to do with our mind map is actually to fill it up with words that we already know. Now, you might think, why would I do that? Why would I write down words that I already know? Well, it helps you to make connections between new words that you find during the next stage and over the coming weeks. So the next step is to actually research more vocabulary. So you sit down, you write down all the words that you already know, and then you get onto Google and you start researching more words, adding to your mind map. Now, this doesn't have to be the same day. It can be over a number of weeks and months as you're practicing, but you've got to keep updating these mind maps. The other thing is, if you find a new word, write down a definition. But most importantly, don't write the definition in your own language. Write the definition in English. You already speak your mother tongue quite well. You're trying to learn English. So make sure that if you keep a vocabulary notebook, you keep it in English, in the target language that you're trying to learn. The other thing we can do is to connect similar words. So this is why it's important to write down the words that you already know, because then you can connect them to new words that you learn. And we'll talk about that in an example in a moment. Also, a very important thing to help you boost your vocabulary is you add collocations to this mind map. So collocations are words that naturally go together. So there are some phrases, some, for example, nouns and adjectives, or verbs and adverbs, and these words just naturally go together in English. If you learn collocations in context, you're going to use them more in your speaking and your writing. So as you're building up your vocabulary mind map, you want to write down your collocations. And I'll give you an example of what I mean by that later on. Okay. So the last and most important step is to write example sentences. the way that people used to learn vocabulary was the teacher would give you a list of words, and I still see this for kids on the trains going home from work. They have lists of words and they have to learn them by heart. This is not an effective way to improve your vocabulary. You need to see these words in context. You need to engage your brain so you can make connections between the vocabulary and situations. So writing example sentences is a good way to remember this vocabulary, and it's much better than memorizing lists. Never memorize lists of words. It's not effective. Okay, so let's jump to the next important thing. So we have a video on our YouTube channel, the title of which is Improving English Vocabulary for IELTS, How to Create and Use a Vocabulary Notebook for IELTS. If you go to our channel, and if Michael's clever, he's going to find this video and he's going to post a link to it in the live chat. We go through this in a lot of detail, and we have some beautiful drawings of mind maps and other methods to have a good vocabulary notebook. But this is something very important to do, okay? But let's look at the examples. Okay, so what I'm going to do with my mind map is to split it up because I'm doing this on a screen, but you would have this on one bit of paper. So let's talk about some nouns, okay? So I've got some example nouns to do with illness. So we've got a doctor, a pharmacy, a pandemic, mucus, an ambulance, a sick day, a thermometer, and panacea. So the first thing I'm going to do is to try and connect similar words. These can be groups of words, or they can be different variations of the word. So for example, a noun, a verb, an adjective. So let's look at doctor. So we've but doctor and the word physician. So physician is just a fancy way to say doctor. But this would be important for writing, for example, if you didn't want to repeat yourself. And it's the same for when you're speaking. So doctor, physician. I've also got a general practitioner. This is a GP. So in the UK, we often talk about our family doctor as a GP, a general practitioner. They just do everything, really. They don't specialize in a particular field of medicine. And another word that might be connected to doctor is a nurse. So this is a person who assists a doctor, often in the hospital. Okay, so we've got the word pharmacy. A pharmacy. So you notice that I've included the article here. So a pharmacy, a sick day. It's always best to write down nouns with an article so that you don't forget them. Many students forget to include the article. So a pharmacy, a similar word, a chemist. What's the difference? Well, in the USA, they say a pharmacy, which is a place where you can buy your medicine or drugs, as they say in the US. A chemist is the word that we use in the UK. Now, if you have gone to a school or you have learned American English, that's absolutely fine. You can use that in the IELTS. There's no problem. But just be aware that you might hear some British English words. So if you want to say pharmacy, that's fine, but you should also know the word chemist, which is the equivalent. Other things like, for example, I, as a British person, would say trousers. This is a piece of clothing that goes on the lower part of my body, whereas Michael, who's American, would say pants. And pants means something very different in the UK. It's what Americans would call underwear. Okay, so moving on. So we have the word a pandemic. We might have a similar word, an epidemic. So pandemic, epidemic, this is talking about a spread of disease in a very serious way. So a pandemic is really what's happening at the moment, a global spread of disease. And an epidemic is a concentrated area where disease is really, it's ripe, it's really serious. Okay, so mucus. I wonder if you know what the word mucus means. So mucus is something that may come out of your nose if you're feeling a little bit ill, and more informal word is snot. Not a very pleasant word to say, but it is a useful bit of vocabulary. So we've got the word an ambulance. So this is a vehicle that takes you to the hospital when you're feeling ill. So we might have paramedics. So these are the people that are driving the ambulance, and they kind of help you when you're feeling ill, you've had an accident. We can also call them first responders. So you can see how I'm grouping vocabulary together here. We have the phrase, a noun, I suppose, a sick day. We can say sick leave. So sick leave is the time that you would take off from work, perhaps more than one day. And we have the noun truancy, to be truant, to play hooky. To be truant or truancy is when, for example, you say that you're sick to your parents or to your teacher, and you don't go to school, but in fact, you probably aren't that sick. So these kind of words are similar, they're around the same topic, so that's why I've grouped them together. So we've got the word thermometer. So this is to measure your temperature. So a similar word within a connection there is a stethoscope. Oh, I can't say it, stethoscope. So this is something that a doctor uses to listen to your heart. They put, it's normally quite cold, they put a hearing instrument to your chest, and then you can listen to it through the earpieces. And the last word we've got there is panacea. So a panacea, it means a general remedy to an illness or disease, something that fixes it quite quickly normally. So a remedy is similar to the word cure. So you can often say home remedy. So here you can see the example of connecting similar words together. This is something that you can do to boost your vocabulary. Okay, so the next topic or next subtopic to do with illness in this mind map was symptoms. So things that show that you are sick, that you have an illness of some sort. So these are some examples of symptoms. So we've got a cough, a fever, a runny nose, a headache, a sore throat, insomnia, diarrhea, and indigestion. Okay, so my camera's covering part of my screen, so I could only see gestion there. Indigestion. Okay, so what we're going to do here is think about collocations, so words that naturally go together. Okay, so for example, a cough, we could say a chesty cough. So a chesty cough is when you're coughing and you have a lot of mucus in your lungs. Do you remember that word from before, mucus? So it's kind of liquid, and a chesty cough, it sounds very bad, and it's not very pleasant when you have it. Yeah. Okay, so a fever, we could say a high fever. This would be a good collocation. High as in high temperature. A runny nose. So this is when you have a cold and you have lots of mucus or snot. I don't like to say that word. Coming out of your nose. And you could say a constant runny nose. This could be a collocation. We have a headache. We could have a raging headache. Yeah, a very serious headache. A sore throat. A terribly sore throat. Oh, I'm very ill. I've got a terribly sore throat today. And we're talking about insomnia. So insomnia, if you don't know what it means, it's when you find it difficult to get to sleep. You know, you're very tired, you go to bed, but you can't drop off, you can't fall asleep. So we might have incessant insomnia. It's continual, it doesn't stop. So diarrhea, a lovely topic. Diarrhea is when you go to the toilet, you sit down and nothing but water comes out. And you'll notice here I'm using the British English spelling here, and the American spelling is slightly different, but to be honest I can't remember how. I think it doesn't have an A, but you know, I'm British, so that's why I put it there. Anyway, diarrhea, painful diarrhea. This could be a collocation. To be honest, I don't talk about diarrhea that much, so it may not come up in conversation much, but yeah. And you can see in the chat, Mike's giving some more useful collocations to do with some of these. How would you describe diarrhea, Mike? Yeah, we don't have pictures of this, that's true. Okay, and for indigestion, regular indigestion, it happens a lot. Yeah. So the idea here is that if I am reading to improve my vocabulary or searching on the internet and I find words that seem to fit together, or I see them on a regular basis, that means it's a collocation, words that naturally go together, and I should learn the collocations as often as I can and write them down in my vocabulary notebook. Okay, so some idioms. So on the left we have idioms, and we're going to talk about what they actually mean. Ah yes, okay, I can see the the collocation that Mike has put into the live chat. Explosive diarrhea. Oh dear, dear, dear. I wouldn't like to be clearing up after that. Anyway, back to the idioms. So we have the expression to be under the weather, to look under the weather, to feel under the weather. And what does it mean? It just means to feel sick. But if you're in the exam and you say, oh, you know, I felt sick on that day, that's fine. It's good grammar. But if you were to use the idiom, oh, I felt quite under the weather, then you're just showing that you have a better grasp of the English language, and the examiner is going to give you a higher score in vocabulary. But again, remember, it's not just that you use one idiom and you're automatically going to get a band score 7. It's in addition to everything else you're doing, using the right words in the right way. Okay, so we had, before we had a headache, a raging headache. Here we have a splitting headache. And this is an idiom that means a very, very bad headache. So again, I had a bad headache is fine, but if you use the idiom, I had a splitting headache, it's going to be much better in the exam. To be as sick as a dog, to be very, very sick. Sometimes we also say to be as sick as a parrot, the bird that normally sits on a pirate's shoulder. So to be as sick as a dog. I was as sick as a dog. Okay, to take a turn for the worse. To take a turn for the worse. This actually means you're sick already, but you become sicker than you were before. So perhaps even you were recovering and then you fall even sicker than you were originally. To take a turn for the worse. Yeah. Okay. And the last one, a lovely idiom, I'm sure that you will want to talk about this all the time, to puke one's guts out. Oh, I puked my guts out. To vomit. So you can see to throw up, to vomit, you can say that and it's absolutely fine. But if you use the idiom, it's much better in your speaking test. Okay, and we're also talking about cures. So let's talk about some vocabulary to do with cures. So here are some cures. A cough drop, an injection, a plaster, British English, a band-aid, American English, a bandage, paracetamol, doesn't matter how you pronounce it, an inoculation, antihistamine, and surgery. So if we look here, we're thinking about the last thing we should be doing. We should be doing this for each part of the mind map, but this is writing example sentences. So for example, I really love the taste of cough drops. Some people do. I really love the taste of cough drops. So I'm trying to use the new vocabulary in context. So an injection. My brother is terrified of getting injections. It's true, he doesn't like them at all. So terrified of getting injections, this is a good phrase as well. So I'm practicing using new vocabulary. Plasters are really tricky to put on one-handed. Have you ever cut yourself on a finger and you have to try and put a plaster or a band-aid on your finger with one hand? It's not very easy. So using an example sentence there with plaster. Can you take off my bandage, please? Probably you're at the hospital. Can you take off my bandage, please? So using it in context. When I have a headache, I take a paracetamol. And it doesn't always work. So an inoculation. So this is similar to a vaccination. So this is when you're given a little bit of the disease in order that your body can learn to fight against it. Yeah. So an inoculation. Getting inoculations is important in childhood. So getting vaccinations is important in childhood. So this is a good use of this word. Antihistamine. If I don't take an antihistamine, my hay fever will flare up. So an antihistamine is a type of medicine or drug which it stops inflammation. It stops your body from swelling up, from becoming bigger and filled with liquid, I suppose. I'm not a doctor, but that's what I think it is. And hay fever, this is actually a type of illness. It's an allergy, a complaint. And it's when during the summer you have what's called pollen from flowers, from plants, and it makes you sneeze. It can make your eyes go red. And to flare up means to get worse suddenly. And finally, we've got surgery, which is when a doctor cuts you open. So sometimes surgery is as dangerous as the disease. I think we can all agree with that. Yeah. Okay, so what we've done there is we've taken words, we've matched up similar types of words, we've gone through and we've spoken about collocations, and we've come up with sentences to actively use that. So let's move on to the next part, an example question. So are people generally healthier nowadays? So this is a type of question that could come up in part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam. So we've got a method to do this. So in English, when we answer a question, what you want to do is to directly answer it straight away. We always answer questions directly in English, and then afterwards we give supporting details. So answer the question directly. For example, personally, I do think the general population is healthier these days. So actually what I've done here is I've rephrased the question in a way. General population, people, healthier these days, nowadays. So I've made my point very clear that I do think people are healthier. Now what I need to do is to back that up, to give a little bit of supporting information to expand on my answer. Okay, so provide supporting details. You can explain, you can give examples, you can give reasons, and you can do all of these things. There is no sort of minimum or maximum answer apart from the fact that you only have 5 minutes in this part 3 of the exam. So here it says, so personally I do think the general population is healthier than these days. This is because when we are feeling under the weather, we take something for it immediately. So what I've done here is I've explained this is because, this, my opinion. And I've also used some of my target vocabulary from my practice. Feeling under the weather. So I've used a nice idiom here to mean feeling sick. We take something from it for it immediately. To take something, to take some medicine or some form of drug. It's strange for me to say drug because this is American English. And in the UK, drugs only means one thing, and it's quite a negative thing. Anyway, I'm trying to be bilingual here so you can hear both American and British English from time to time. Okay, so I would move on perhaps and add something to this. For example, when I have a splitting headache, I will take a painkiller such as a paracetamol. So I'm just adding a bit more information as an example. And I've been very clever here because I've used another idiom, splitting headache. And I've used some more of my new vocabulary, paracetamol, which is a painkiller, something that stops your pain. And in the purple sentence, so that's why I would say modern society is much healthier than previous generations. So one of the things I notice about my students when we're doing mock exams for speaking, they don't know how to end. They lose track of what they're saying. And a really good way to end an answer is to summarize what the question was again, to make it go back to what you were answering. And that's all I've done here in that purple sentence. I've just summarized my main point. So that's why I would say modern society is much healthier than previous generations. So it's saying the same thing as my opinion. So this is a way that you can practice. You go through, you do some nice mind maps, you think about collocations, matching up new vocabulary, thinking about writing some examples, and then you go and answer some questions and concentrate on using new vocabulary and also concentrate on this basic structure. Your answer directly, whatever it might be, then some supporting sentences, and if you can do a little bit of a summary of what you said, bringing it back to the question, it's a nice natural way to end a question before you go on to the next one. Okay, so what we're going to do is see some questions on screen now. So, should people be inoculated for all diseases as children? Which types of illnesses are the most serious? How can people become healthier? And what is more important, health or money? Okay. So I'm going to leave these on the screen for a while, just so everyone can catch up with me, because there is a delay between what I'm saying and what you're seeing. And I wonder, could anyone in the chat maybe write down an answer to one of these questions? How could you answer one of these questions directly, and what supporting details might you use? So as you're thinking about that, if anyone's brave enough to write, don't forget we've got Mike in the chat there. I can see he is talking to himself quite a lot. Now he does this normally anyway, but if you want to write down an answer, a suggestion, how could you answer one of these questions using the method that we had before, answering directly, then giving supporting details. But if you have any other questions that you'd like to ask me or Mike, any issues you're having with your preparation for the IELTS, feel free. We're here to help you. We haven't got anything else to do today, so we'll sit around waiting for your questions for a while. So I see Mike, he couldn't hesitate. He couldn't resist, rather. He wanted to give an answer. Yes, all children should get vaccinated because vaccination is important. Well, I think that's an okay answer, but I don't know. I mean, it's nice that you've used vaccinated and vaccinations. This is showing that you know how to use the different versions of the word there. But perhaps we could use inoculation instead of vaccination, just to show that you've got even wider vocabulary knowledge. But that sentence on its own, I think you might have to add something to it, some supporting details. Because if I were an examiner, if I was anyone really, I would say, why? Why? Why do you think that, Michael? So I'll give Michael some time to come up with his supporting detail. But if anyone else is in the live chat and you want to finish off what Michael said, yes, all children should get vaccinated because vaccinations, vaccination is important, he said. How could we continue that sentence, that answer? Well, let's look at the another question. Let me give you a few examples here. So what type of illnesses are the most serious? Yeah. So I might say, in today's society, there are several different types of diseases which are very harmful. I see Michael's written something. I'll come back to that later. So here I'm going to introduce that. Firstly, diabetes is rampant in many parts of the world. This is usually because of a poor diet and lack of knowledge. Another serious disease is cancer, and unfortunately there is no known cure. So unfortunately it's something that we can't solve at the moment. But this is why I think there are several different types of illnesses that are very harmful to society. Okay, so what did Michael say? This is a bit of delay. We're having a conversation with a delay. He said, yes, all children should be vaccinated. If we don't inoculate our children, they might catch some bad and entirely preventable disease. I think that's very good. That's a good answer. And let's look at the last question. So you can practice all of these at home. I would recommend that you record yourself when you're practicing your speaking so you can listen back and try and correct and improve. But what is more important, health or money? Well, this is a very interesting question. For me personally, I would say that health trumps money. This is because even if you were a billionaire, if you had a very serious disease without a cure, all of your money couldn't buy your health. So that is why for me, I pay a lot more attention to my personal health than my bank account. So you see, I don't have to keep waffling on for a long time, but I did answer the question directly. I gave a reason for my answer, and I did a little bit of a summary of what I've said to bring the question to a close. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the last point. So how can you actually find out what your current band score is in your speaking and also your writing? Well, we have some options for you. So if you have an essay, a task 1 or task 2, that you would like to know what the suggested band score of that is, you can send an email to corrections@theieltsgrind.com. So corrections@theieltsgrind.com. And we will be happy to actually correct your essay for free. And we will do a live stream where we will explain exactly what you did well and how you could improve your score. Also for your speaking, if you would like to do a practice speaking test with one of us from the IELTS Grind, we can arrange that. And the same thing, we'll give you free feedback and we will also put it up on our YouTube channel so that everyone can learn what you're doing correctly and perhaps how you could improve your score. Okay, so if you want to improve your writing or your speaking and you don't have access to a tutor where you live, you can contact us on this email address and we will help you for your writing and your speaking. Okay, so that's bringing us to the end of the live stream for today. But tomorrow we have Michael, who is that surprised looking fellow on the left of the screen. He's also in the live chat at the moment. He's going to be talking about writing tomorrow. We're going to be correcting an essay live on camera. So this is a essay that we've had from Facebook. But if anyone today is watching and they want us to correct their essay tomorrow, you just need to send your email to corrections@theieltsgrind.com and we will be correcting your essay tomorrow and not someone else's essay. So make sure that you send us that. You can send us an essay at any time and we'll have a look at it. Okay, so thanks everyone for joining us today. And unless there are any questions before I go, I'm going to say good night and see you later. Okay, so let's close this down. Bye-bye.